we are doing the most for Gaza. They said Gaza is our issue and we're doing the most for it.
That entire region is a militarized zone. It's not accessible without permission, and there are security checkpoints all along the way. So it's very clear there is a narrative that they have bought.
If you are thinking about family back home who don't have enough to eat, you can't pay your rent, you can't educate your children, unfortunately you're going to resort to these quite degrading methods of gaining a bit of extra money.
One of the realizations I came to is that living in the West, we have no clue what a real police state is like. A critical mass of people just cannot gather.
I was just thinking, it's going to happen. He's going to see it.
These people need to be convinced.
Yeah.
And they need to be lied to in order to do the job in the way that they do.
This is really a partnership in genocide, unfortunately.
Ultimately, that is where change will happen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a special of the Narrative House podcast that is being done in cooperation with Ummah Action for Gaza. Myself, Omar Hussein, and Yasir Hassan were recently at the Global March for Gaza in Cairo. We only arrived a couple of days ago, and today we wanted to film our reflections of what happened when we were out there. So without any further ado, I'll introduce you to Yasir.
Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you, Omar.
Walaikum salam. Good to see you too. Before we start, I want to just put some context in terms of what is happening. Gaza is still being genocided in a way that has not stopped in its severity or its intensity for over 600 days. Over 120 people were murdered yesterday, and just today, in the first few hours, dozens of people have been murdered at the aid distribution center and also in a marketplace in Jabalia. This is the reality that Gazans are living with. One of the things that I said to Yasser when we were out in Cairo was that I normally follow the news events very closely. But as I mentioned there to you, what happened there was I felt a little bit disconnected from the up-to-date, hour-by-hour news reports of what's happening in Gaza, even though we were physically very close to Gaza, being in Egypt. And you said something in response that was really quite insightful.
Well, I remember the conversation, and I think I was just reflecting on the fact that just being an observer of events seems to make us feel close to what's going on the ground. Just knowing what's happening as a outside observer, and now that we're on the ground, interacting with people, involved in what's going on, actually disconnected slightly with the wider narratives and news. Sometimes we're getting message from back home telling, "Oh, the Samud convoy is here," or "This is happening, that's happening," and we weren't even aware. It shows how maybe we've been sort of trained in terms of our understanding of what being involved really is, and just being an observer is not enough, and we need to maybe rethink a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's interesting because we've heard this statement, all eyes on Rafah or on Gaza. But actually, as you say, we're not here to just count casualty figures. Otherwise, what are we adding in terms of trying to change what's happening on the ground in Gaza?
Exactly. I mean, we shouldn't be satisfied with just being fully aware of what's going on and checking updates every 30 seconds and, so what, in all honesty, if we can't have an impact on the ground, if we can't do something that makes some tangible change.
Okay. So leading on from that point, why did you go to the Global March to Gaza?
Yeah, well, so I'm involved in, as you mentioned, this campaign called Ummah Action for Gaza, which was started some months ago by various groups and individuals who felt kind of disheartened by the activism that we were engaging in on the streets of the UK. Marches, protests that often just seem to have no end goal. Seem to be just venting, in all honesty. And what we concluded, almost working back from the point that Israel itself is not going to stop. So the blockade, the bombing, the occupation are not going to end unless somebody intervenes physically, unless somebody intervenes with force against Israel.
Yeah.
And I think that's not a point that I think there should be much dispute over. But if we work back from that, then that surely means our call and our activism should in some way be tied to that end goal.
Yeah.
And therefore, we started this campaign, which was specifically directed towards calling for military intervention and ideally finding ways of working towards that. We organized a demonstration at the Egyptian embassy some weeks back. And it was actually a discussion with one of the speakers who we asked to speak at that demonstration that got me thinking, where he initially was quite hesitant to speak. And when we asked him why, his response was, what if something I say results in someone in Egypt listening, taking some action that gets them in trouble, gets them imprisoned, gets them beaten, gets them killed, perhaps. Who am I to put someone in that position? Mm-hmm. Who am I sitting here in London telling people in Egypt what they should be doing? I just don't feel like I should put myself in, or I have that, I should have that responsibility. So he was in two minds, and in the end, alhamdulillah, he decided to speak because he agreed with the premise that we do need to talk about military intervention. Yeah. But it was that made me think, because that came from a place of sincerity, and then a few weeks later, I hear about this global march, and to Egypt, the same place that we were demonstrating outside of, and I felt like, well, this is an opportunity. I will be a hypocrite if I turned it down. I can't demonstrate outside the embassy, calling to people in Egypt, but then when I have an opportunity to go to Egypt myself, I say, oh no, I'm not going to do that. So really, that was the thought process in my mind.
I mean, I felt exactly the same way. It's just you felt you wanted to be closer to that call, to that demand, and not to be a hypocrite, as you say. Yeah. Calling from the UK in terms of exposing the Egyptian regime and everything that they're doing, the complicity in the genocide, that's one thing. But being there, I mean, it does involve a certain element of risk. Yep. But you would feel very hypocritical that you're just doing it from afar.
Exactly.
And so I think that totally resonates with me as well. I want to ask you about Friday morning. So we were both there. Friday morning, we'd arrived on Thursday, and we were walking in downtown Cairo. Tell me what happened.
Well, so our group wasn't due to leave for a couple of hours. So we thought, we've got some time to kill. We're not far from Tahrir Square. Why don't we go have a walk in Tahrir Square? So one of those places you always wanted to visit. Probably not the most sensible decision on our part, given the situation. So we wandered up from our hotel to Tahrir Square. We noticed along the way, police vans in the streets. Interesting. We got to Tahrir Square. It was completely closed off with barricades and police at every corner, and police at the center as well. Again, probably at that point, we should have thought we probably don't need to be here. But we were quite insistent on taking pictures of ourselves in Tahrir Square.
We're thinking for social media.
We were thinking of the message, spreading the message, bro. So we walked all the way around Tahrir Square, and we noticed actually every time we stopped, police started sort of walking towards us and urging us to keep walking, because what we realized is you're not allowed to stop and start to gather in the square. You have to keep walking. But we wanted our pictures, so probably stopped 2 or 3 times, right? And I think in the end we
realised there was a lot of eyes on us, so
there were a lot
and we
of eyes
tried
on
to
us.
move away quite quickly at that point.
So we probably walked around most of the square at this point, and then we tried to walk off towards one of the exits. I think we realised, okay, we've got as much as we're going to get in terms of pictures, and I think at this point we'd been flagged, not surprisingly, so we initially stopped by one person who I think of the two of us, you always seem to get targeted.
Yeah, I think they know I'm Arab very quickly, and they turn it to an Arab discussion.
It turns into an Arab discussion. So they immediately started questioning you. At one point, he asked for your phone, at which point I sort of secretly pulled out my phone and just started deleting my social media while he wasn't looking. And then I think you started saying to me, distract him.
Yeah.
So I pulled out my phone and just started waving at him, saying, look at my phone. I think at that point maybe you got an opportunity to delete.
I deleted some stuff.
You deleted some stuff from your phone, but he saw you doing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so eventually they got fed up with us. They realized something's going on. And our line of being tourists wasn't quite cutting it. So they pulled us into a side alley, question us, at which point I think they'd seen enough on the phones that we just said at this point, yeah, we're here for the March to Rafah.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we were held there for a little while, waiting for other people, while other people were being pulled in.
And many were being pulled in.
From
all walks of life.
Yep. And then eventually chucked into a police van and driven to a detention centre in the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was an interesting experience there. I mean, it was clearly a place where people were expected to be held for some time. There were beds. When we arrived there initially, I guess about 12, 15 people. But over the course of the time we were there, I mean, certainly more than 50 people. I don't know how many in total, but I mean, they were dragging people of all nationalities. So, I mean, I can recall French, Spanish, Italian, German, Swiss, Canadian, Belgian, Malaysian, Greek,
Irish,
and then a whole load of Turks.
Yeah. There's a lot of Turks. Yeah.
So, it was the United Nation of resistance.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting time. We got to speak to lots of people who kind of, were all there for one purpose, all shared a kind of common reason for being there, and a common empathy with the what's going on in Gaza. And we prayed Salat al-Jum'ah in the detention cell, a khutbah given by a Palestinian, which maybe you can comment on in terms of specifically what he spoke about. But alhamdulillah, it was
powerful.
It was a powerful khutbah. And yeah, I guess we got a taste of what a police state is like, and it's a lot worse for the Egyptians than it was for us. But alhamdulillah, we were there for 6 hours, and at which point I think in all honesty, there were just too many people to do anything with, and they were forced, I think, to let us go.
Yeah, I think that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
I feel initially they were probably going to deport us,
yes,
but by the time they'd managed to pick off 50, 60, 70, maybe
and more coming in by the minute.
Yeah, I think they realised it's going to be easier just to send them back to Cairo and stop the protests. We obviously weren't privy to what was happening at the different crossings at this point. We only found out much later in the day that they had been shut down violently by paid thugs of the Sisi regime. But I mean, some reflections I had of our time in detention was definitely one amazing experience where a young Turkish brother named Mehmet,
yes,
as we were being dragged into the airport, each of us had one soldier assigned to us to pull us in. Very young, eager young soldiers trying to prove their worth to their superiors and giving us a good pull as they take us in.
Yeah.
But Mehmet broke out with Free Palestine. And it was so powerful because we all joined. I don't think anyone remained silent. And it was a young 23-year-old Turk who led that chorus of the chants. And then I changed it to Arabic as well, and to really resonate with the Egyptian people there. And it was a really interesting experience that we were detained, but yet we were still that bit of resilience or, resistance against what was happening. And as you say, the khutbah was very, very powerful, because rarely do you have a khutbah that actually speaks of what you're doing. And he related it to the time when the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq were making their way to Medina and Hijrah. And that when they were in the cave, they were not alone. And he reminded us we're not alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us, is with the people of Gaza, the people who are coming to support them. And that was really, really quite a powerful way to relay that story. And as you said, the discussions that we had were really quite inspiring, that we saw people from so many countries, primarily Muslim in our group, but there were several non-Muslims in our group as well. And they were so eager to challenge what they saw as the regime clamping down on this legitimate act of solidarity with the people of Gaza. Like Mehmet, he constantly challenged the security personnel. We had to remind him maybe the style wasn't the most effective, but the passion, the raw passion for the ummah, I think was quite amazing, really.
Yeah. I think what was also interesting about that time was our interaction with the police. Because, before you go in, you don't really know what to expect, right? Obviously, you have this picture in your mind of this barbaric regime, which it absolutely is. But when you meet the individuals, it gives you a little more insight into why they do what they do.
Yeah.
And in honesty, I think they were very confused by us.
They were.
Because they'd been given a narrative about who these people were coming, these foreigners coming from different places to cause instability in Egypt. They're troublemakers. They're not here, in anything relating to Gaza or anything like that. These are just people who have it in for Egypt and are here to cause trouble. So when they experienced us, when they saw us praying Jumu'ah, which they watched at one point, the senior police officer came in and corrected the Qibla because we were slightly out of line, and he adjusted the
That
imam.
was interesting, yeah.
I think it really made them think, and there were a few points where they actually came in and were debating. I think at one point you had a debate in Arabic with this guy.
I think they essentially said, no, we are doing the most for Gaza. They said Gaza is our issue, and we're doing the most for it. They've been told this line by the government that they're doing so much, and all of these troublemakers are trying to stir up issues in the country, but in reality we are there to support Gaza. And that was quite telling of how much that propaganda had affected them, because it wasn't coming from an insincere place with many of those people in that room. In fact, when I said to one of them, who's going to liberate Palestine, it should come, and he goes, from Egypt, he said, like that. But it was almost like, again, playing into this concept that the Egyptians are incapable of doing it. So it's not that we shouldn't aspire to it, but we don't have the capability. So how dare we, put Egypt at risk? So really, there was a propaganda that sat behind that.
And I think that was our first taste of it, and we experienced it multiple other times, which I'm sure we'll get into in our trip.
Yeah.
But I don't recall a single engagement with an Egyptian that was negative about Palestine or Palestinians. And I mean, whether it's the many engagements we had with normal Egyptian people, or even with the security forces, in all honesty. So it's clear that there is a narrative that they have bought, and if we have made them question that even in a small way, I think that's something positive, inshallah.
So, as you say, 6 hours later, we were released. We were dropped off randomly. Funny, outside the military college, actually, of all places. Yeah. And we made our way back to Cairo, downtown Cairo.
Yep.
But we did talk about something on the way back, that we're going to now resort to our real plan. Can you shed light on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, So when we came, I think we came with an understanding of what we were going up against in terms of the Egyptian regime, and an expectation that there was no way they were going to give permission for the march to go ahead, right? And for those who don't know, the march was starting in Cairo. We then had to travel by initially it was by coach, but then by taxi. Eventually as far as Al Arish, which is a town on the outskirts of the Sinai.
No, Al Arish is in the Sinai.
Oh, is in
yeah,
the Sinai?
Ismailia.
Ismailia,
yeah.
Ismailia, which is a town on the outskirts of the Sinai, and then from there by foot through Al Arish and into Rafah. Now, that entire region is a militarized zone. It's not accessible without permission, and there are security checkpoints all along the way. So it's very clear there's no way to get there that doesn't involve getting permission. And because we knew that, we effectively had a plan B, which, as I said when we were there, was really our plan A.
Yeah.
Which was to make as much content as we could on the ground in Egypt, meet as many people as we could and discuss with them, and try and discuss with the other activists there, and propagate our messages around the need for Egypt to do more military intervention, but also just to understand more ourselves about what's the reality of Egypt, so that we can improve our own campaign when we go back.
And there's also a lot of people that give you their view without necessarily assessing it for themselves, or maybe having negative experiences or positive ones, but there's not necessarily a balance to this discussion. I do find it can be quite extreme. And all the Egyptian people are allied with the regime, or vice versa. And all the Egyptian people want to do everything they can. They're all 100% committed to the cause. The reality is it's not as clear cut as that. It's a bit more of a nuanced discussion. But we did come across a lot of positivity from the Egyptian people.
No, I think so, and I think this, one of the realizations I came to is that living in the West, we have no clue what a real police state is like.
Absolutely.
And just experiencing some of that, and then speaking to the Egyptians there, it gives you a slightly more nuanced view about, the Egyptians could do more, right?
What can they do as well? Because you realize the reality of how the control works, and to what extent you're being surveilled and interrogated or detained. You realize, hang on, what are you asking the Egyptian people to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the public spaces are controlled so heavily, particularly after the Arab Spring, to the point where a critical mass of people just cannot gather. And so I think I think we need to take some of that into account when we talk about Egypt and talk about what Egypt can do. That doesn't mean we don't still call for change to come from the Muslim world, because ultimately that is where change will happen. But we might have to have a deeper view about how that will come about.
No, that's very true. As you mentioned, we did quite a bit of social media content. I think we managed to do a few interviews out there as well. So that was part of our interaction, or part of our purpose there. But can you tell me a little bit about the individual discussions that we had, not the Egyptian population, maybe we'll move on to that, but actually with the people who came out for the same cause as us?
So we met some interesting characters out there, and I think one thing we found on the whole is that a lot of them, while they were all there for the for the common aim of their sympathy and sympathy around Palestine, actually a lot of them didn't understand the Egyptian regime or Egypt very well, and so a lot of our conversations were around helping them understand what's going on. Because I remember sitting with some young brothers, the students who were studying in Egypt, but from the UK, and they just asked me, "But why? Why would Egypt stop the march?" They just didn't understand it. Another person we met is Osman Noor, who's organizing his own campaign, trying to rally the OIC to intervene militarily. And again, I think it made him think that maybe just making a legal argument that this is perfectly justified according to international law is not going to be sufficient, because the regimes themselves are part of the wider framework of occupation. And even after our conversation with him, he started to use this language, and I think he posted a video about Egypt afterwards.
Much more explicit.
Much more explicit. Yeah. Which is what happens with experience, right? You come and experience something yourself, and your eyes are opened. And I think so. We had a few engagements with people like that, where I think the fact that we had probably a bit more of an insight into Egypt and Egypt's role in the occupation allowed us to maybe have this conversation and explain some of what's going on to people that were there, which I think was really interesting.
Yeah. No, definitely. I had that experience as well, and there was a definite shift in people's thinking, and it's fact based. Giving them examples of why that the Israeli occupation can continue with the support of the neighboring countries. That it's not just a passive support. It's a very direct support in terms of trade, in terms of protecting the borders, and in fact even allowing military vessels, warships, to go through the Suez Canal, which a lot of people were surprised about that Egypt allowed that. So I think it's very important to give them that insight that, look, this is really a partnership in genocide, unfortunately. Okay, and the Egyptian people versus the regime. What would you say about that?
So after being released from detention, obviously at that point they pretty much said to us, "You're free to move around Cairo, enjoy the city, but don't go on the march." Basically, so that left us to walk around, visit the sites and make videos in various places. So we engaged with a lot of Egyptians, Uber drivers, people at the places we were visiting, and I think that was quite eye-opening. And I think you had a number of conversations in Arabic. You probably had the best conversations because obviously in Arabic, but it was certainly eye-opening to me that we didn't have a bad experience in terms of when one of the first things an Egyptian will ask you is where you're from, and when they ask you where you're from, they mean where you really from.
Yeah. They don't know about Britain. Originally,
they don't care that you
Palestine, Pakistan.
Yeah, I learned that quite quickly, and I stopped saying UK and just started saying for Pakistan, because that's what they want to know. But the minute you would tell them you're from Palestine, you'd see people immediately, just doing that hand movement, which is a sort of symbol of sort of shame. They would open up, talking about that they'd love to do more. One in particular, I think, was quite explicit, but maybe you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you say, having the conversation in Arabic gave us an opportunity to really talk to the common person in Egypt, and there was amazing discussions. Many people talked about the fact that the regime has not allowed them to do more, but one was even more explicit. He said, "What do you expect from the son of America, Sisi?" And I was, wow, he said that to us.
Yeah, we'd not heard the name Sisi mentioned.
Many people clearly alluded to that. They alluded to the regime, the rulers. They should open the borders. If you just open the borders, we'll do the rest. That was a very unified, I would say, viewpoint. However, to explicitly call out Sisi was rare, and I think the consequences for someone there calling out Sisi is not a joke.
Yeah.
So there was really a lot of positivity around wanting to do more. And there was one experience where I think we bought some soft drinks, and a brother goes, "Where are you from?" In Palestine. He goes, "No, here, take the money back." And I was like, "No, I'll pay."
He was
He goes,
insistent. Yeah.
"Just take the money back." And it was a small gesture, but that's the reality. But there was one point that some people have pointed out, and we also experienced ourselves, especially one day when we went to go and buy some equipment that we didn't actually end up needing for the March to Gaza, some camping equipment. That in one of the malls there, we saw that there was a lot of people seeming to live their best life from buying stuff from McDonald's and KFC and Coke and Pepsi, and it was all kind of normal. And for us who maybe are more involved in boycotting, at least as a form of standing in solidarity or sentiment, from a purely a place of sentiment, to just show that we care for them and we're not going to support these companies who are explicitly supporting genocide. There was quite a few people who weren't engaged in those things.
Yeah. And, that is the other side of Egypt that we saw. I mean, the malls were, as good as anything you would see in, Dubai or Saudi or wherever. And people enjoying a materialistic lifestyle as they would in the West.
Yeah.
So I don't. I think it would be wrong for us to paint a picture of a society that's on the verge of snapping.
Yeah, exactly.
There's absolutely a balance there, but I would absolutely say that for people who are living in a police state, in a state that's the news that they hear is so controlled, what they can speak about is so controlled. The fact that so many of our engagements about Palestine were still positive, was still about wanting to do more. I think that says a lot about the depth of sincerity and feeling they have, so I think we shouldn't forget that as well.
Yeah, and I think on the other hand as well, so we maybe experienced some of the middle class, high end life, but we also saw the other end where people are desperate just to make ends meet. We saw some. I think the way you put it was perfectly. You perfectly captured the point that it's a failed state. People were begging for the most. It was a really quite sad experience, wasn't it?
The best example, I think that in the masjid of Ibn al-As, I think that, which
it was a shocker. Really,
it was a shocking incident. But
yeah. So when we were there, we walked into the masjid. That you want to give your take your shoes off, but someone's saying, "Oh, can you give me money?" And so, okay, why am I giving you money for taking my shoes off? But they put it away for you, and they take money. Then I was going to make wudu, and then the person who showed me the way to wudu wanted money, and then we came and we prayed Dhuhr and Asr. Then a brother who worked in Amr bin As Masjid said, "Oh, let me show you around." And he showed us some interesting things, actually, a well, and he showed us where, subhanAllah, what was it? It was a dua of Imam Shafi'i.
That's right.
That was written onto a pillar. And we're like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And then he just hangs around us, and we're like, "Why are you hanging around us?" Yeah. And then he actually asked for money. Then we go to get our shoes, and the guy's giving us the shoes back, wanted money. And it's like, what you even want to bring it up with them. It's like, why are you asking for money? And then they feel offended, like, no, we need money. And then as we're leaving, a police officer asks us for money.
Yeah, because he showed us the way to do something. It's like
you should be looking after your visitors. These are tourists. But it was quite the opposite. It was like a money-making scheme.
Yeah.
Every interaction.
And it makes you feel like the friendliness is just completely fake.
Yeah.
Which is not a nice feeling. But obviously,
it is a failed state. I think
said to ourselves,
you answered it perfectly when I was getting a bit frustrated. Ultimately, this is a failed state. They don't pay them enough wages. They don't have opportunities. What are they going to do? If you are thinking about family back home who don't have enough to eat, you can't pay your rent, you can't educate your children. Unfortunately, you're going to resort to these quite degrading methods of gaining a bit of extra money.
Yeah.
And that was quite evident, really. Okay. Something happened to us, actually, after we thought we were in the clear. So we thought, we spent our 5-6 days in Cairo. We've done lots of social media content. We've had lots of good discussions. Planning for this podcast, we wanted to get some additional footage of Cairo.
We did.
And we were walking downtown Cairo again. And what happened this time?
Well, we thought we'd get some B-roll, as they call it in the game.
Yeah.
And So we're walking along the streets, just recording random shots of you
Bookshelves and walking, you walking, yeah.
You know, and I remember just saying to you in passing, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we got picked up here again? Because we were near the place we got picked up before. And almost on cue, a plainclothes guy came up to us, initially looking all friendly. Oh, Assalamu alaikum.
What are you doing?
What are you doing here? Where are you from? And then obviously we cluck. Okay, here we are again. So, and, same thing, questioning about, what you're up to, why you're here. In all honesty, this time I was just more irritated than anything, because I just thought, all right, well, they're not going to go through the whole process again this time. So this time,
I told them very early on as well, we'd already been detained. We were here for the March to Rafah. We were told that we could go back to Cairo. So can you just let us go? We've already been through
this. We've done this once already. They weren't really having it.
Yeah.
And so, before we knew it, there's probably 6-7 guys standing around us.
Yeah.
And they separated us out. There was a guy who speaks a bit more English speaking to me, and some people speaking to you in Arabic. Then they put us to the side for a bit while they,
went through
the phones. And I remember, again, at this point, I was just irritated, thinking, I thought we were going to go for lunch now. Now we're going to.
We were heading back to the airport soon after that, yeah.
And I looked at you, and I remember you looked white as a sheet.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what's he so concerned about?
Yeah.
We've done this. Before.
We've been through this before, but it wasn't the same this time. Actually,
little did I know that this time my phone was wiped, but yours wasn't.
So I had the whole social media content on my phone,
including some quite hard hitting
against the regime. And there was one bit. He definitely knew there's something wrong, because he saw my phone. He goes, hang on, you've got lots of strange content here. He said, you keep talking about a problem. This was the Amr bin As masjid video. Because you keep saying problem. I said, yeah, there was a problem. They were trying to take money, but I was trying to, reduce the level of questioning. And then he saw the interview that I did with Migration Films, and he goes, what's this? They've got a microphone. It's very formal. And then they found something that they kept missing. He kept looking at my Instagram messages, and he noticed the Turkish Armed Forces. And he said, why have you got the Turkish Armed Forces in your messages? And I said, they should be doing more for Gaza. But he kept going back in the messages, and what he was missing is that they had the Egyptian armed forces there, which to do that in Egypt, to be calling on the Egyptian armed forces formally in Egypt is considered dissent against the country. But subhanAllah closed his eyes to that. So when you were looking at me, I was just thinking, it's going to happen. He's going to see it. And then what was it, about a minute or two later, subhanAllah, the order came in just to let them go.
Yeah.
I think they obviously got the instruction from their seniors that yes, they have been detained before, they are known to us, they can go. But until that point, I honestly believed I was not leaving Egypt that day.
And it was funny because I didn't know why until later. We'd gone off, and I think we go back to the
I didn't want to tell you until after, because I was worried that they could still be following us.
But while they were having that conversation with you, I had an interesting conversation in English with another guy. So he was going through my phone.
This is interesting, yeah.
And so he asked me, what, obviously where do you come from? What's your job? A few other questions. And he just seemed confused. And he asked me, so why are you here? So I said, look, I came for the March to Gaza, came to support, to show support for the people of Gaza. Obviously you guys didn't let me do that. So now I'm just, hanging around Cairo, and we're going to get a flight and go home today. And he just looked at me straight in the eye and he said, so you're telling me you left your home, you left your family, you left your job, you came all the way here.
And you paid for it by yourself.
You paid for it just to show support for the people of Gaza. And I said, yeah. And he said, no, I don't believe it.
You couldn't believe it, right?
I don't believe that. And I just laughed. I said, so what do you mean you don't believe it? And he said, who paid for you to come here? And again, I was just laughing at him at this point. I said, who do you, so I asked him back, who do you think would pay for me to come here? What, you tell me what you mean. And he wouldn't answer. And I said, no, tell me, who would pay for someone to come here? And he said, I know there are people who have been paid to come here.
Yeah, that's what they're told. So they're told there was a Zionist attempt to cause problems in Egypt.
This is another one of the narratives that have been propagated to these people to convince them to do their job. And I think it's important people understand that these people need to be convinced.
Yeah.
And they need to be lied to in order to do the job in the way that they do. So he'd been told, whether it's Zionists, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood, who, you know, obviously outlawed in Egypt or seen as a disruptive presence since the time of Morsi. So whichever bogeyman they use, but somebody's paid for these people to come here. Now, to be honest, I wanted to just have it out with him, but at this point, the call came in, and he was actually told, and he actually just sort of handed my passport back.
It was so strange,
with a bit of an attitude, because he didn't want to, but he handed the passport and phone back. So as we were walking off, I just sort of went back to him and said, "No, but seriously, I'd like to know who do you think paid?" And he just said,
"He won't answer."
No, I don't.
It also shows that they're very much the whole security apparatus works on a hierarchy, because really, if the police officer or whoever he was, Mukhabarat, interviewing me, he should have realized that what he had found on my phone was sufficient for further investigation. Yeah. But as soon as the command came, they didn't give a damn. It's like, okay, fine, go. They've said you can go. I'm not going to think for myself. I'm just going to follow the command of my senior officer. So it's not really something they believe in. They don't believe they need to crack down on us. They're doing a job, and they know to get their money, they have to play ball. I really felt that. But it really left a feeling that we really underestimate what it means to live under a police state, the fear they can instill in you. They were much more aggressive with me this time.
Yep.
So I, for example, had my hands in my pocket. He goes, "Take your hands out of your pocket and step back." I was like, well, they didn't talk to me like that on Friday. So the whole nature was different.
Yep.
I thought, I'm a British passport holder. I'm probably getting good treatment here.
Exactly.
You imagine an Egyptian being picked up on the street, and it gives you a completely
different
experience and a different type of respect for what people in our countries are facing by this apparatus of fear that's been created. Really.
That's right.
So just moving on, in terms of maybe some take-homes, what would you say in terms of the Global March to Gaza, and what lessons did we learn, and what do you think is a message that those participants learned about their experience in Egypt?
As a result of the attempted Global March to Gaza, it's opened people's eyes up to the role that the Egyptian regime plays in the maintenance of the occupation, and has put a focus on the Egyptian government as well as Israel. I think that's a positive thing, because you have to know your enemy, right?
Yeah.
And I think whereas before we almost felt like lone voices talking about Egypt, and people are like, why are you demonstrating outside the Egyptian embassy? What's that all about?
And there has been now a massive call even for boycotting, for accounting them,
which would be unthinkable.
But we were already there, and we were surprised people didn't see it. But yeah, it's totally shifted people's opinion on this.
This is it, and that and as March to Rafah, that gives us a platform that we can build on, because Egypt and Turkey were the focus of that campaign.
Yeah.
And that's something that we will keep pushing. But I feel like now people are coming around to that same way of thinking, that actually it's these countries that are holding up the occupation, and if we can weaken those pillars, that will have a direct impact on Israel as well.
On Friday morning, before we actually even set out from the hotel, something quite huge happened when Israel undertook quite a huge attack on Iran, killing over 20 military commanders, over 10 nuclear scientists, decimating certain locations that were part of the nuclear program. It really was something that was totally unexpected. Well, certainly wasn't unexpected in the sense there was a lot of talk about it, but the impression that we were given from the words of Trump and others that this was unlikely to happen until after the negotiations, which were due in a few days' time. But Iran struck back within about 24 hours. So we were following the events really within about 24 hours after the initial strike. And something, I think, radically changed in the mindset of people, which is this concept of Israeli invincibility. Can you just give your opinions on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the point we made about, a police state can't just be held together with force. It has to be held together with ideas that you build within the population. And one of these ideas is this idea that Egypt does what it does for its own security, for its own national interests, to protect the people. Because Israel is such a powerful state. And so for us on our own to go up against Israel would be crazy. And this is the kind of thing that the police directly said to us.
Yeah, they did. They actually said that explicitly.
So this is an idea that has been sold to them, and they believe it because the evidence around them has held that up, right? Israel hasn't been directly attacked since the wars in 73 and before.
Yeah, in terms of a nation state with a capable military. Yeah, so over 50 years ago.
Exactly, over 50 years. So not in the lifetimes of many of these people. So for something to so overtly and so comprehensively shatter that narrative is going to have an impact on Egyptian society. And I think this is what's happened now. They're watching bombs fall. They're watching the Iron Dome missiles completely ineffective. They're looking at scenes that could be Gaza, but actually it's Tel Aviv. And all of a sudden that iman is coming through, that emotion for wanting to do something for Gaza will come through.
And we're being sold a lie.
And the fact that we're being sold a lie, and we have, and also I think I think Egyptians do feel that that Palestine is a particular responsibility of theirs. Allah's put these people of Misr and Asham as guardians of Philistine. He's created these people for this purpose. They're the direct neighbors. So in some ways, for Iran to be doing this, it must cause a sense of shame when they feel like we're next door and this was our role. Yeah. This is what we should be doing. So I think this is, all of these things have an impact. The fact that people have been traveled from around the world for the sake of Gaza, the fact that other countries that are further away are taking on Israel, these are all going to start to make them think, and all of this weakens the control that the police state has.
No, great. And I think it goes beyond Egypt, doesn't it? So we've got Jordan, who've actually utilized their military to shoot down drones and missiles that are heading towards the Zionist occupation. And that's quite telling of how far their support to protect this entity is, really. It's not even remaining as passive or as neutral in this conflict. They're aiding the aggressor. I think, it goes beyond Egypt, doesn't it, really, even?
Absolutely. This exposes them.
So finally, what message do you have for the Ummah, for people who want to continue their pro-Palestinian activism, given the fact that we were there, we were on the ground, it was quite an experience in terms of understanding some of those challenges? What would be your message to people listening today in terms of what they can do?
Well, I would say the fact that we didn't march wasn't a failure in my eyes, because it exposed something important that I think pushes the resistance as a whole forward, which is the focus on the Egyptian regime. So I would say what people can do is now start to adjust their thinking and think, all right, how do we focus more on not just the direct Zionist regime and the occupation forces, but the wider structures that hold it up, and how can we continue to have a direct impact? So Egypt, as an example, supports Israel through economic means. It has qualified industrial zones, these industrial areas where they effectively launder Israeli goods. They come into these areas, get finished in Egypt, and then sold to America and around the world as made in Egypt goods. There's a huge income stream for Israel. There's tourism to Egypt. Egypt relies heavily on foreign tourism. And then there's the army of Egypt, which, as we've discussed, like the police, while there are higher echelons of that institution that, will come from certain families and will be educated in the West and are indoctrinated, that only goes so far. The army is a large institution, and most people are like the people we met, where they're just average people from the Ummah, who are doing a job and have been sold the narrative that everybody's been sold about Israeli dominance, about the need to put Egypt first, and so the more we focus on these narratives and breaking these narratives apart, the more likelihood there is that some people will start to take action within these societies, and the whole thing will start crumbling down.
No, inshallah, I think you're right. I mean, if anything, having those experiences and just being, really active in that field, in these discussions is crucial, because there are so many who try to present the other side of things, or we're incapable, always giving a negative view of the state of the Ummah, but actually not the potential of the Ummah. And that, I think, is important to raise our hopes and actually look at some of the positives in a way to motivate us to do more. Because too many times you see people feeling completely hopeless about the situation in Gaza. And even though the people of Gaza themselves still have hope that something will happen, despite the predicament and the genocide that they're facing. So on that note, Jazakallah khair for your time today.
Barakallah.